Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters on KPFT. The time is now 11 a.m. is what I usually say on a Friday morning if we were live from the KPFT studio, but we are not. We are right here. There goes evergreen content. we are right here in the middle of the quarantine and the lockdown, and so we are broadcasting via GoToMeeting, and so we're going to do the podcast version, which goes out internationally, but we're also adding a video element with our guest today, Dreeke. So stay tuned, keep listening. If you are a longtime listener, you know we always reserve just the first few moments of the show to tell you a little bit what's going on here in the Houston and the Gulf Coast area. But I do want to let you know we're lucky to have him on the show here. He is the co-author of the book Sizing People Up. After 2 decades as a behavior analyst in the FBI, Dreeke knows a thing or two about sizing people up. He's navigated complex situations that range from handling Russian spies to navigating the internal politics at the Bureau. Through that experience, he was forced to develop a knack for reading people, their intentions, their capabilities, their desires, and their fears. So his book, Sizing People Up, I read that a couple of months. Actually, I listened to it on Audible, which I do a lot. But I've listened to that a couple of months ago. And then as early as this week, there was an article that came out in Think Advisor, which is a online magazine for financial advisors. So we've got a lot to talk about, but keep listening. Just a quick update here. KPFT, the radio station, is I would say closed. They're open. There are the only people there, since it's a volunteer-run station, are the paid staff, which, since we are a nonprofit, that's limited to about 2 people. And so Rourke from the Wide Open Spaces, I think, is still at the station. And then you're going to hear a lot of stuff on archives. I'm going to send this to them, and hopefully we'll get it played on the FM side as well. But right now they're doing a lot of stuff from the archives. So as soon as we hear anything different, we'll let you know. Won't affect the podcast version with that. One quick update, Houston Money Week. As you know, we've been kind of talking about that since November as part of the leadership team for Houston Money Week. That is known as free workshops and seminars for financial education for people in the Houston, the Gulf Coast area. The one thing that's noted is that these are live events and they're open to the public, so that has been put on hold basically for 2020. We are working to kind of get some online content and stuff out to people. I think we might even gear it towards digging ourselves out of the recession, as opposed to some of the other topics we were talking about. So that is a thing that we're pivoting on, and we're having to adjust. Stay tuned. You'll hear more about that, and I'll keep you up to date with that as our partners kind of adjust to that. With that, Robin is patiently waiting for us here. So Robin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. What a crazy, crazy world we're in, but I think the world is pivoting pretty well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I usually don't have my background here inside my house, so we're different day and age here.
And I got my wall behind me too.
I think I told you before we hit the live button here. Note to self: next pandemic, get your hair cut before before you get started here.
More so my wife than me, so at least I'm better off.
Well, so I did. I mentioned your kind of your history and your bio a little bit right at the beginning, but you are former behavior analyst for the FBI. Can you tell? And what I'm interested, we've the book Sizing People Up, very interesting book, and we'll kind of do a deep dive here in a moment. But can you tell us something outside of that bio so listeners can get to know you a little bit better?
Yeah, sure. I always like highlighting, that hardcore type A background so people understand, that I've had to overcome a lot of that. So I went to the Naval Academy. From the Naval Academy, I went to the Marine Corps, FBI. And my lifelong dream when I was young was to become an aerospace engineer, Navy pilot, test pilot, astronaut. And because people always say, so how did you become the chief of the behavioral analysis program inside the FBI? I said, well, it was easy. I failed at all that other stuff. So the stuff that kind of frames my background is that hardcore type A hard charger, which you can hear from that bio. But when you start working in the world of recruiting spies, if you have that mentality, you're going to fail majestically, which is exactly the same in sales. In any business, if you have the I gotta win mentality and you're trying to sell a product or service, you're going to have some majestic failures and you're going to ruin your brand, because it really comes down to how do you build relationships, how do you build trust, and how do you make it about the other person. And so it's taken those natural born talents and skills you do have as a hard charger entrepreneur, and learning the soft side of how do you actually build relationships with trust, open, honest communication, and transparency.
So that's a very interesting point that you start off with. The piece that just came out in Think Advisor uh, is that's just one of the things that you talk about is from. So we have different listeners here. We've got mostly just the general public, but then also we do have financial advisors that tune in and
Yep.
listen as well. And
Probably my
so
biggest client base as well as financial advisors.
so part of that for us is building trust, and that's one of the things you talked about in this. Uniquely, as I read that, some of the things real life right now that are going on for me that I thought, well, let me pick your brain while I have you on the show, because it is directly related to that article about building trust as a speaker. And one of the ways that I go out and talk to people are seminars.
Hmm.
And so I do a lot of live speaking. When I have clients, we're in the office and there's a lot of nonverbal communication going on there. That's what I'm used to. That's what I'm good at in my head. Having to make the transition from that to these webinars and these Zoom meetings that everybody are doing right now, there's something different going on there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And believe it or not, it's actually not too great a difference, because especially if you're doing Zoom or doing like right now, I see you, I see from, roughly the chest to the top of your head, which is really when we are interacting live is all I'm seeing anyway. Because, when I started my career as a behaviorist, I was a nonverbal expert, Joe Navarro, retired FBI guy, wrote the great book, What Everybody Is Saying. He's my great friend, teacher, mentor, and guide. And so I was tutored under him. And granted, there's hundreds of nonverbals that you can see and observe when you're live with someone. But what I found over time, when my job was to recruit people and basically build relationships and not interrogate anyone, I'm really just looking right at what I'm looking at now. So I can tell a lot from there. I'm looking basically for comfort nonverbal displays, vice discomfort or stress displays. And so I can really see just about everything I was seeing anyway. And we're really listening for voice, because voice is a large part of our nonverbals as well. And so we can still do all the same things by demonstrating what all human beings are genetically and biologically coded to do. And that is, we want to belong to meaningful groups and organizations and be affiliated with them. And we want to be valued by the same. And whether you're doing it live, because I'm a speaker too, and I've had to adjust my entire life around it, or whether you're doing it via Zoom or like we are now, or even just through voice, because our vocals are also nonverbal. We can see and sense differences in tenor and pitch and modulation and tempo. Those are things that we can hear if we're just doing verbals as well. And so all those things we can continue to do, because you continue to demonstrate that value and affiliation with others by doing one of these four things. If you're seeking the thoughts and opinions of others, you're talking in terms of their priorities of what's important to them. You validate their thoughts and opinions and who they are as human beings without judging them. And then you empower them with choices. If you do at least one of those four things in any of your communication, whether it's written, text, email, live, or through Zoom, it's all doing the same thing. You're all demonstrating that value and affiliation. Your brain's going to reward you with dopamine. And ultimately, you're leaving that person feeling better for having met you. You create great brand, and they want to come back to you.
I love it. I love it. So that was a very specific question there. So which I'm
I
dealing
get
with.
very granular. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I love it. I love it. That's exactly what I'm making the transition right now to, and I think a lot of people. So that's probably very helpful for listeners right now. So I want to pivot a little bit because I wanted to start with that, but I really wanted to talk about sizing people up because I really enjoyed listening to that.
Thank you.
Some of I've been a student of different books that you've even mentioned here, and one of the things that kind of makes yours different is the story, the real life experiences that you've had that you kind of sprinkled into this 6 points. You kind of sprinkled those stories in there, and the stories were interesting enough to keep me going. So I really, really enjoyed the book. You start the book with something called friend or foe. What are you talking about when you talk about friend or foe?
There's lots of ways to determine, to think about friend or foe. It was really at the beginning of the book, which took place during 9/11. In a time, very, very similar to now, but different in a lot. So similar in the sense of a collective deep breath of what's going on. But I've compared it. Back then during 9/11, at least we felt unsafe as a nation, but you felt personally in control of your life. And now we feel safer as a nation, but personally not as much control of our life. So it's the same. A lot of the similar emotions going through us, and the same kind of uncertainty. And so that's the same thing. Except back then we actually could do things about it individually or as a country, as a nation. So back then, friend or foe was me assessing. I had potential individuals that could help protect national security as we're trying to identify what the threat actually was, where it's coming from. And so trying to identify rapidly, who you can trust and who you can't trust was, the real point of that period of my life, where you have to do things at a pretty rapid pace to assess information coming in. At the same time, I'm starting to learn that, hey, just because I have great information doesn't mean my management's going to accept my information because of my reputation or inexperience or something. So it really came down to, learning to manage relationships.
I love that, and I've heard Navy SEALs talk about the fog of war, and it's
Oh
like
yeah.
when these events happen, there's so much stuff going on at one time, and kind of filtering out what your resources are,
Hmm.
whether it's an ally or bad information or whatever, seems very useful right now. What when it comes to thinking like an FBI behavioral analyst, what can you share with us about that?
Yeah, it's funny. Been asked that a couple times lately. How I came up with that phrase or that thought process, and it was really working with my writer Cam. He's fantastic at taking my content and my stories and making them sound great because he's a fantastic writer. And I remember at one point, at that exact point in the book, he wrote, I told him about the methodology and how I'm thinking through a process or a challenge or a situation. And what he had written was he said, I was sweating bullets. And I looked at him and said, Cam, I don't sweat bullets. That's not how it works. And he goes, what do you mean you don't sweat bullets? I said, if you're thinking like an FBI behavioral analyst, you're just thinking cause and effect. You're not emotionally reacting to things. So that's what that's referring to is when you get the stimulus coming in, especially, I mean, this is a perfect time to think about this. When you're getting all these different new stimulus and new things coming into your life, can you calm down and rationally think through them? Just don't think, like, oh my gosh, and overreact and cause what I call that crazy brain where you get, emotionally hijacked and you're dealing with frustration, anger, resentment, discontentment, fear. All those emotions start clouding your cognitive, thoughtful process. And so thinking like an FBI behavioralist, or basically someone who's self-aware, is, just saying, hey, what am I actually trying to achieve and what my goal is, and what am I about to do or say going to help or hinder that? And ultimately, the goal in every situation I have is to create a good, healthy professional relationship. Because those professional relationships are the bedrock of everything. And so it's starting to take, it's like, how do you get out of emotional hijacking? You think to yourself first, when you recognize, all right, I'm going off the rails. Is what I'm about to going to do or say going to help or hinder what it is I'm trying to accomplish? That gets you thinking again.
I love that. I love that. As a financial advisor with the markets, what they've done from January to now, in the last two
Yeah.
weeks, the volatility. I mean, we're having very real conversation with clients right now.
Hold
But
tight.
this is, yeah, this is a normal. This is the new norm right now. You said some very important things there. You talked about that crazy brain, fear, people emotionally reacting, and so some of the stuff that you write about in the book gives us a framework for doing the right things here. I like the 6 signs for behavior prediction as well. And we could probably do a whole show on each one of those. That's a lot. Um, but just to put it into context for listeners, if you're somebody who meets with clients on a day-to-day basis, what we're talking about today is extremely helpful. But even if it's something that's ancillary that you don't think that you have face-to-face interactions, if you're a business owner and you're hiring, knowing whether you can trust the person that you're about to hire or bring into your staff, super, super important.
Absolutely.
So I would like to ask you about these 6 signs for behavior prediction, because I feel like that's something that can translate well with really anybody. One of the things you talk about is vesting. What is vesting?
Vesting is it's a great sign. Vesting is basically where you're actually recognizing whether the person you're interacting with is as much vested in your success as they are their own. So vesting, signs of vesting are, they're giving you training opportunities. They're pumping information to you for your success. They're including you in all kinds of different activities and things to maybe even at their own sacrifice of time and resources. But vesting is shown either in actions, deeds, or words that they're actually as mutually vested in your success as they are their own. So vesting is a great one to see.
I love that, and I don't know if we've got roughly about 20 minutes or so, but some of the stories that you tell in the book, the vesting, or you've had informants where people that may not be what everybody sees as a not necessarily like an employer, that sort of thing, and the examples you used in there. Do you have time to share just a little bit of that with us?
Yeah, sure. Like the first guy, the first confidential human source I mentioned there in the book, we call him Leo. Again, all the names are changed to protect people's backgrounds, but this individual was a fantastic patriot. He had been assisting the FBI probably for 25 years, and he would have great relationships, bad relationships, it all kind of went up and down according to who his handler was, and if you were humble enough and understanding enough that to realize he was actually trying his best to make you look good, because he understood if you look good, he got more leeway to do the things he wanted to do to help protect national security. So it was really a mutual vesting situation. So if I was very young when I first started interacting with him, and this guy was probably he's almost 80 by that time that I was working with him. He's like a grandfather figure, really. And I saw early on with him that he was actually taking actions, that were not probably as good for his business as they could be, but he wanted to show and demonstrate that he was actually trying to, help me out / help the country out, even at personal self-sacrifice professionally, potentially by what he was doing. That was a great sign of vesting, because I recognized it. You didn't have to beat me over the head with it, because then it would have been about him. But he actually took a lot of actions and a lot of risk, personally and professionally, to help the country and help me. So that's a great sign of vesting.
Wow, I love that example there. The Another one of these 6 signs that you talk about for behavior prediction is longevity. What does that refer to?
Longevity, it's when someone's demonstrating through actions and deeds and words again that they see the relationship as long, as being much more than a quick quid pro quo. I think in the financial advisor world where, you are, managing accounts and managing relationships, this is a great one that they're demonstrating. And I remember, because one of the ways you demonstrate longevity is you establish traditions, like whether you come to town once a month or once a quarter and you go out to dinner together. And in these current times, it's very rough to do that. But there's other ways to establish that longevity because people are doing it right now. Matter of fact, I have one this evening. Where we're having a online book club happy hour. And so when financial advisors can do something like that, where and actually it's very interesting. There's a great potential right now to become much more personal with our individuals in our lives. Because like right now, you're in my home and you're in and I'm in yours. And same thing, with financial advisors or anyone in any industry working from home. If you have one of these, at home happy hours where everyone's sharing, I mean, then you have the ability to walk around the home, share each other's hobbies. I mean, that then becomes what I call relationship intensifiers because they can be accelerators, as long as the tempo is in pace with the other person is looking for. But we typically, when we go out to dinner, or a drink or something with someone, don't have that kind of personalization that we actually have the ability to do, and people are more open to now. Where our hair's more down, or grown out and gray, for most
Right.
people right now. So we have this great ability to demonstrate that longevity because, hey, you're in my life deeper than anyone's ever been before, even though we're not physically connected. So it actually, if we capitalize on what we've been given and let go of what we no longer have, we have great potential here.
There's definitely some new opportunities in that area that I don't think any of us necessarily saw, or maybe they did, but I think most of us going from being able to have these interactions online to this is what we're doing now,
Right.
completely different thing. So we were talking about longevity. That opportunity to maybe go deeper with some of those relationships. I know a lot of financial advisors right now are paralyzed and afraid to get on the phone with their clients. That is not what I do. If anything, you need to be talking to your clients a little bit more. And I don't know if you're like me, but I've been getting all these emails from everybody, like their response to COVID-19. So I was sort of afraid of, well, does this look inauthentic to reach out and to talk to people? But right now, people are pretty receptive when you're calling them. Almost, they just want to talk.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real opportunity to go deep with the relationships there. The other thing that you talk about is reliability. What is reliability when it comes to these 6 signs?
Yeah, and this is a great time that we do need reliability because reliability is the combination of competence to actually do what you say you can do and the diligence to follow through on it. And whether you're in finance or whether you're a leader inside an organization, this is a key area to really focus on right now because it can be for many people, maybe even most people right now, psychologically challenging to have self-discipline. And so a lot of people I think, went into the pandemic with a lot of, ability, for, the ability to get things done. But when given this new way of doing business from home, the diligence to actually follow through is what might be challenging for some. And and this is again where having these relationships is really going to be key and critical because having good interpersonal communication and dialogue is really key for brain health. Because the things that keep people from being really diligent, I'd say probably the major distractor from it is the fact that their brain health starts falling off because they start no longer feeling valued and affiliated with others. And so our brain is no longer rewarding us for doing the things we used to do. So that's why it's really, really important, not just for you dealing with clients, which is really, really important, but also you internally as in your organizations. Keep demonstrating that value and affiliation with others. Keep holding people to standards. That's obviously important, and that actually helps them maintain that diligence. But keep doing those 4 things I said. Keep seeking their thoughts and opinions, talking in terms of their priorities, validating them without judging them, and empowering them with choices. Be a resource. Make sure, especially now, be a resource for the success of your people. Understand what their challenges and issues are, and be a resource. And keep communicating. And you said pick up the phone and call. I'm telling you, I signed up for Zoom the other day, 40 minutes free. I'm a big believer in it because you can see face to face. It does even more for the brain than just the phone.
I love that. Those are very important things that you just mentioned here. Having the self-discipline, that's hard for most people
It is.
normally. So in a crisis time right now, that's extremely important. Brain health, that made me think of, the people that are in their offices, I deal a lot with retirees, and there's almost this point of, I'm going to say, mourning, where you go from your social validation being there at work, and you don't necessarily think that's the case, but when you retire and you're away from your social group, your identity changes. And so it's the same thing with our brain health. You might see your neighbor there that's next to you in the cubicle, but if they're not there, you're not getting those little dopamine rushes of being pat on the back and that sort of thing. So this interaction like this is huge, however big your organization is or your company as well, and that keep communicating. The fourth thing that you talk about is actions. What can you tell us about actions?
So actions I look at in a couple different ways. The first one, I write about mostly in the book is, positive actions versus negative actions. And that is, is this person, validating and building people up and saying positive things about people and what they're doing in life, or are they being negative and putting people down and gossiping behind people's backs? Especially again, during times like this, you want people to be positive. You want to, and you want to, when people are being negative, this is an important thing to remember is, try your best to stay away from judging them for being negative. Usually people are going negative is because an insecurity in themselves is being flared up in some way. And so if I see someone being negative or being downtrodden in some way, it's because something is flaring up in their life that gives them a feeling of insecurity. So they have an inappropriate behavior to try to counter it. So try to understand what they're insecure about so you can validate it and make them feel better about it. Now, the other side of actions is what is the easiest, and that is I call it past patterns of key behaviors. And that is, if I see you do something once, twice, or 3 times, the likelihood of you doing it the same way 4, 5, and 6 times is pretty dang high. It's that, definition of crazy. Do the same thing multiple times and expect different results, you're crazy. So I'm always looking for past patterns of key behavior. So again, right now, what's really good is once people are now adjusted to working from home and communicating with clients and everything from home, you should see a pattern of behavior with your folks and also with your clients. And that will now become the new norm. And this is where I don't like having people rely on hope. I hope they'll be better. I hope they'll be better tomorrow. No, they won't, unless there's a new stimulus that causes them to be better. A new outside input that's going to happen there. Because if someone is behaving below par right now because they were rock stars, before the pandemic, and now something's fallen off, to expect it to kind of pick up without any outside input or stimulus, you're setting yourself up for brain hijacking because you're going to get angry, resentful, and discontented because someone's not performing. Well, you should have poked at that a little earlier because you can predict it. So that's what that's about.
Wow, that one is really powerful because there's two. As somebody who considers myself a good friend to friends, the way you set that up, when people go negative, try not to judge because you don't know necessarily what's going on in their lives. However, I'm also a big believer in, if somebody's talking negative at the water cooler, I'm going the other way. So the idea that patterns, if you see this repeated behavior over a certain amount of time, to hope that that's going to change without something very significant happening. I like the way that you frame that. That's super important in our day-to-day lives, even outside of the business world. The fifth thing that you talk about is language. What can you share with us about language?
Language, I've actually already mentioned a few times, with those 4 things. But here's what, because people a lot of times will ask me, so how can you assess someone really, really quickly? I need to know like this, if I can trust them or not. I said, well, remember, I redefine trust quickly in the book as trust is actually predictability, not actually the other side. What people think they can trust someone is liking. Just because you like someone doesn't mean you can actually predict what they're going to do. Liking has to do is, have an overlapping of morals, ethics, beliefs, interests. That has nothing to do with being able to predict what you're going to do in each of these different lanes in your life. And so, language is something you can assess very, very rapidly in the sense that, remember, those 4 things to demonstrate value and affiliation: seeking thoughts and opinions of others, because we only do that with people we value and want to affiliate with; talking in terms of their priorities, because here's a guarantee of human beings. This is why human beings are exceptionally predictable. All of us will always act in our own best interest in terms of safety, security, and prosperity for ourselves and our loved ones. And if I can figure out what you think is in terms of your best interest, not what I think it is, but what you think it is, I now know what you're going to do. It makes you focus 100% on them. And so that's why it's important to talk in terms of people's priorities, because that's what's in their best interest. And so they'll listen. If you're not, I guarantee you they won't. You validate all those thoughts and opinions, who they are, without judging them. And validation doesn't necessarily mean you agree with them. It means you're digging deep to understand why they are like they are, who they are like they are, without judging it. And finally, when you give people choices. Now, here's the golden thing with this one, which is awesome. If you understand what your goals are and priorities, and you took the time with number 2 to understand what their goals and priorities are, now when you give them choices, they will overlap. It's a guarantee. Our brains just work this way. And I always would end every conversation or a question I would have if I wanted one of my good American patriot folks to do something. I'd always end it with, if that's something you're comfortable with, because that isn't a choice, because it's something, a nice little thing on the end that just says it's a choice. And so what I'm looking for, because this is the language I'm always going to make sure I'm using with someone, what I'm looking for in kind is, are they using that language with me? Because I can hear that right away at the beginning of any conversation. Are they using that language to make that conversation about me? So that's what language is about. Now when you want to talk about, is it sincere and genuine? That's when we're going to look at the nonverbals. Are they doing that with good, high comfort nonverbal displays? Smiling, head tilt so you can expose the carotid artery a little bit, eyebrow elevation, smiling, anything that's up and out, demonstrating high comfort with words about you. You probably got a good thing starting to go right there.
Wow. Okay, now I'm super conscious of the way, because I heard the video. I'm like, no.
See, but look at all that smiling though. It's all good.
So the last one, we've got just a few more minutes
Sure.
here before the end of the show. We're getting right towards the end. As I'm saying that, I'm going to pause here because the book, I was able to listen to it through Audible. I know that they can get it through Amazon. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, I know you also have a consulting company as well.
Mhm.
How would they find out where to get more information?
Absolutely. My website is peopleformula.com. All one word, peopleformula.com. You got links to the books there. I do have one online course that I just launched, based on my first book. It's not all about me. And everything, and I'm shifting everything. Everything I teach that I did live speaking, live consulting, everything we can do totally virtually, because it all applies in all worlds. Because as we're saying here, nothing's changed. The ability to shake hands has changed, but our interpersonal communication dialogue has not. And so it's all completely still applicable.
I love it. I love it. If you're in the car and you're listening right now, don't feel like you have to write it down, because we have the podcast notes as well. So you'll be able to find the links on there. And we'll finish here with number 6, which is stability. What can you share with us about stability in the last 2 minutes?
Sure. Well, what's really great is we've covered this already as well. And that's why I love these 6 signs. They all completely continually circle around. No, not one is more important than the other. And you don't need all 6 in order to assess someone for trustworthiness. It kind of depends on the individual. Stability, it's emotional stability. During times of stress, duress, and challenges in life, do they maintain cognitive thought, or do they go off the rails? And it's okay. Most people do go off the rails, in situations like that. How fast can they come back? And what can you do to help them come back? By asking, I ask what I call discovery questions. I never teach, mentor, and guide anyone in the sense where I tell them what to do. I teach, mentor, and guide by asking questions. And if I understand what their goals and priorities are, and I ask them, hey, help me understand as they're going crazy, help me understand, is what you're doing going to help or hinder where it is you're trying to go? That actually gets that cognitive thought going. It helps them stop being emotionally unstable and get back to emotional stability.
Wow. Wow. Robin, thank you so much. We're right here at the end of this show. Is there anything that I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with us today?
No, but I'd like to add, here's 2 quick things you can do to start doing this right now. One, start seeking people's greatness and write it down. For everyone you're interacting with, whether it's clients or people you're working with in life, start identifying what they're really awesome at, because everyone's doing something off and wrong and they're insecure about something. Start ignoring that. We all got it, I guarantee. So start seeking their greatness. And the other thing is, write down the top 3 priorities, both personally and professionally, of everyone you interact with. And you start paying attention to those things, you're going to start recognizing resources that you can bring to them in terms of them. And then you do those 2 things, you're going to start building some good, healthy, strong relationships.
I love it. Robin, we went through so much in 30 minutes. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
My pleasure. You too, Chris.